Hello and welcome to Europe's Tech Stories from Series.E, an audio and video podcast series highlighting important stories in the world of Europe's startups, its entrepreneurs, investors, and ecosystem leaders. I am delighted to have as our guest today Zhong Xu, co-founder and CEO of Deliverect, as well as my co-host Chris O'Brien. Welcome to you both.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks for having me.
It's great to have you here, and we're excited for this discussion. I guess really just dive in first thing. Can you just tell us more about Deliverect? What is your mission and how did this all get started?
Yeah, 100%. At Deliverect, we're really building the backbone of digital food. And what does that mean is we really are helping restaurants around the world, small and big, to connect and sell on all possible online channels, right? So we started very much in helping restaurants to connect, and that was even pre-COVID, to channels as Uber Eats, Deliveroo, Just Eat, and these marketplaces. But today, we're really providing one operating system for these restaurants to sell omni-channel. And what really makes us unique is we don't only help them to sell online, we control and help them on their menus and workflows because we connect seamlessly pretty much to every physical restaurant around the world. And we can do that because we connect to pretty much every point of sale. So these restaurants, point of sale, cash registers, any of them in that space. We exist 4 years, a bit over 4 years, but today we power almost 40,000 restaurants in 40 markets, ranging really from enterprise restaurants as known names as KFC, Burger King, Taco Bell, to smaller restaurants or restaurant chains like in France, like Big Mama's, as well, Goico Grill and other chains, right? So it's really a diverse side of things, and it's a very interesting time to be in.
Well, I know Chris is, I think, going to ask a little bit about the pandemic stuff in a minute, but it's very interesting to hear that you started really just right before in 2019, and I imagine there's an interesting story there that we will get into about starting this business with the ideas that you had, and then having something like the pandemic come along and completely changing the landscape. Because I think that's interesting timing. I think we'll also talk about the fundraising. So, but before we get to that, I'll pass it to Chris and let him kind of dive in.
Well, I would say let's just pick up there because I'm sort of intrigued by the timing as well. I know people have been trying to crack the so-called food tech code for a while. But and there's lots of players out there coming at that from different angles. But obviously, yeah, as Ethan mentioned, you guys had some interesting timing there. So maybe talk a little bit about what was sort of the state of the food tech market when you jumped into it, and then how did the pandemic really impact that trajectory?
Yeah, I mean, today we're almost a 500 people company processing, 300 million orders. So, it's almost $9 billion on a year. So people always ask me, how the hell do you scale a 500 people company in 4 years? How do you do that? And my answer is, I'm cheating. You don't do that, right? So to be fair, I've been almost 20 years in the hospitality industry, right? So I grew up in this space. My father has actually a point of sale company for Chinese restaurants, and as a immigrant, a young kid, you can imagine he was asking me to do all the work and putting me at work at age 16, 17. So I grew up there because at that time I even created, I think, over 1,000 very ugly websites for Chinese restaurants. I was a very rich teenager though, because I was charging, I think, 250 euros per website, multiplied by 1,000 between my 17 and 18. So that was a productive time of the year. But that's how I got into the hospitality side. However, as I didn't want to take over his business because it was old, clunky, point of sale legacy, I went to study software engineering. And, as turned out, when the iPad was released by Steve Jobs, I thought, wow, this is really the moment to change that point of sale world because it's old, clunky. How do you make it modern on cloud? So basically, with my co-founder, we launched the first iPad point of sale in the world. Name very fitting, was called posios.com. And we were one of the first 3,000 apps. In hindsight, 2 lessons learned. one, we should have made a gaming app or a fart app and charged $2. We would have earned way quicker money than doing a full suite of point of sales. Two, be careful what you do with naming, because although I thought it was perfect because POS, iOS.com, when we launched in the US, people were all asking me, Zhong, why do you call your company piece of shit iOS.com? I'm like, what do you mean? It's a company term. So, that's how I started.
I was going to make a joke about that, but there we go.
Yeah. That is always the funny thing.
Lesson learned.
It's the first thing that hits the ear, but multicultural. Yep. Well, you mentioned
it's
your
even
co-founders.
a term in the US. It's so funny.
That's great, and it segues into the co-founder idea, because you mentioned this one of the co-founders. So you started with the iPad point of sale business. How did you meet because you're, I think, 3 other co-founders, if I'm correct. How did you meet and decide to build then Deliverect?
So with 2 of the co-founders came later. So one of the first co-founder, my CTO, he was actually my thesis professor at the university, right? So I was doing software engineering, and he thought like, hey, this, Chinese guy can make a lot of websites. Maybe we should use him to make, mobile websites. So there was a startup that, he was launching, and I worked actually for him, and I created all these modern websites. But as we progressed, and then we joined a couple bigger companies, we found out that we could work really well, right? And today it's actually funny. He's even family because he's married to my cousin. But it's really about first you need to work together and you can build it. So to make it more interesting, I think that company POSiOS.com, we actually scaled that quite quickly. So from 2010 2014. With almost no capital, we scaled that to worldwide, where we're serving restaurants in US as well Asia. But as we didn't have experience to raise capital, as well didn't have experience to scale sales-wise the business, in 2014 we merged with a retail company called Lightspeed, and maybe that name you will have heard, because Lightspeed today is a public company where serving over 300,000 merchants from retail to restaurant around the world. So basically, we built the hospitality side of Lightspeed from almost zero to all these customers around the world, and that's also where I met my other co-founders, Jerome and Yalta, where also a funny story actually. Jerome was brought into the company when we merged to actually manage us. Somewhere they didn't think it was logical to have 27-year-old manage, 10 millions of budgets, and maybe you should have a seasoned manager to help us out. So that was a really good experience. I hated his guts. We fought a lot, but maybe it has sense to bring an experienced manager as well. And so, when we want to start a new company, it was really logical to join forces. Get the experience of go-to-market with our product knowledge.
Wow, so you must have lots of fun founder family reunion events between all those relationships.
Exactly. Yeah.
So you guys left Lightspeed at some point then to start Deliverect. I mean, did you all immediately come out together, or did it kind of start with just one of them and then it kind of gradually the others came with you?
We had this, we were hearing from restaurants around the world back then, as we had a lot of customers, that they had a big issue. And the issue was they are seeing, more and more of their revenue coming from these marketplaces, 10, 20%. And that was in 2017, 2018. And they were worried about the fact is that, the number of channels digital would expand. They saw it coming with the retail of Amazon, and then, in the hotel sector with Booking.com and so on. So they really said, hey, we need a solution that can allow us to be future-proofing ourselves. And when the digitalization happens, maybe where the food is sold on TikTok, Instagram, Meta, Google Food, and so on, beside these marketplaces, we need a partner that can provide that. So I thought, hey, that was a good idea, but I hate to reinvent the wheel. So I searched, around the world for solutions that worked well. And to my surprise, nobody really built that layer on top of all this fragmented point of sale system around the world to connect with restaurants. But even worse, most of these marketplaces didn't even have APIs to, upload the menu, and inject the orders. So basically, I went around the world and said, hey, is this an interesting idea? And if interesting, I asked these restaurants, how about you pay me a small license fee? I don't have a product, but if you give me 3 months, I'm gonna give you an MVP. And very much lesson learned through the years is, try to limit MVP to the bare minimum. And the bare minimum is you don't have a product and someone is paying. So that's really the idea. And that's how we started very quickly. And so when we launched this, we had a quite big client pool, and obviously with my network or history in point of sales, pretty much every point of sale company said, hey, we want to work with you. And, that allows to accelerate, right? Obviously, COVID happens, and, everything that should have happened in maybe 5 or 10 years time frame, where I had time to scale and calmly build a company, I need to do it in 2-3 years. So hence we accelerated rapidly and, raised even 200 million just in 18 months to jump on the curve and making sure we can serve these restaurants around the world.
Well, let me ask a little bit more about that, because I sort of alluded to this before, but restaurant tech, point of sale tech, things like that are kind of one of these things that people have been trying to crack for a long time. I've written about companies here in France, for example, who started much earlier and had trouble getting traction. The timing wasn't right. So you guys had great timing, but right when you were launching, what were VCs saying to you? Were they saying, food tech, restaurant tech, it's great, you got these customers, the MVP, whatever, but we've been burned, we're not convinced, or at that point, were they on board and say, yeah, we think the time is now?
To be fair, I think most people said, again, Zhong, you're crazy. Like last time, who the hell is going to use a point of sale on iPad? They said, who the hell need this solution? Why would, the system not do it themselves? I think, with my credibility, it solves a lot where they want to fund me just because the team behind it and they believed we could do it. And I think one of the things, and a book, everyone knows is 0 to 1 from Peter Thiel is, one of the key aspects beside timing, I believe heavily in timing, is you need a secret. You need a secret that I know for a fact is true, that everyone around the world believes it's not true. Yeah. And the secret is that, every VC or every person, probably you and every person I talk to, they're like, hey, why would a point of sale not build this? Why could they not do this? Why don't they just do this? Or why would a Uber Eats not build this? Right. But the reality is the secret is it's very complex to do it. And the secret actually is that a point of sale company is not a technology company. It's a service company. And so this means that if you really want to make a high-tech software company that iterates on a daily basis, release constantly, you cannot have a different kind of company doing it. And so this allows us to very much build that layer on top of these point of sales. And the result of this, everyone realized how hard it is to connect to a physical restaurant. And that's why today, every big marketplace around the world is working with us to do this one thing. And as you get this, almost flywheel effect of more online channels, more point of sale, more restaurants, you become very sticky and very defensible, right? So, it's all these smaller things that, you need to know and you need to believe that's helped it out, right? And the fact is that we also funded, a couple, pretty much every round ourselves. Does show the commitment, and it's not our first time doing this in this industry, so that's allowed a lot of investors really believing what we do, and I think they're very happy with the results and and any return they're getting. Yeah.
Well, and I wonder, and that's a fantastic list of, well, part of what we want with the podcast is always that it's a teaching moment as well for entrepreneurs to kind of learn what did you do that actually made this work? Because there's all the anecdotes, there's all the stuff on social media, there's the books, there's the stuff where you hear the results a lot, but not necessarily, how people really applied things, like you mentioned, and that the specific book and some of the little nuggets there that really made sense for this. On top of all of those details that kind of lined up to make it so that you and your founders were the ones who could make this work, how did the pandemic fit into that? Because obviously, that changed the dynamic of how restaurants and the service industry work drastically and very quickly.
Yeah, I think, two sides. I mean, the restaurant industry is probably the least technology driven, industry out there, right? I think most industries spend a very big chunk of their money on software and tools, right? While in restaurants, it's still only less than 5%, right, of their total expenditure. So it's very underdeveloped. And so I think really the pandemic accelerated, something that should have happened in a time frame of 5 to 10 years in only 2 years, where you were forced, every restaurant around the world was forced to go online and digital as a means to survive, right? And so that's actually also forced us to accelerate, our path. I think our timing was impeccable. I mean, before I would say, hey, maybe I'm lucky, but I've done it 3 times, so maybe the timing is more important because timing you can wait. And so I think really you need always, you need to be 9 months to a year before these events happen. And you do not know when these events happen, so sometimes you need to wait, sometimes longer, but you need at least that to build a minimal product. But then when, a compelling event like this happen, you just need to scale. And what really is hard is, we're not that remote first company, right? We like the culture, we like bringing people together. So, we literally scaled in from 2019 from 40 people or 50 people to, now 500 people. So we added last year 250 people just in a year. So for us, it's a very big, challenge to do that. And that was honestly fun and not fun. It's painful to grow that quick, but if you need to be, you need to do it.
If I just to follow up on that, I want to talk a little bit about what you guys look like today and what you're seeing now, because we've seen sort of two related, somewhat parallel phenomenon. One obviously is the macro economy the past year has changed, so there's a lot of talk about how that's affected funding and scale ups, et cetera. And then second, and this has also been quite variable, for companies that were accelerated by the pandemic. I'm always careful not to say that the pandemic is over, but obviously life is sort of returning a bit more to normal the last year. So how have those two things sort of impacted you? Or have you seen a deceleration in adoption? Have you had to sort of adjust somehow to your growth trajectory for one or both of those phenomena?
I think the first one, the macroeconomic environment, especially funding wise, I personally love it because it's finally you can make a distinction between a okay company and good company and great company. Last year or 2021, there was no difference, right? Anyone has a grandeur idea, you could raise capital. You don't need to look at metrics. You don't really need to look at results, as long it fit the teams, right? And that created a situation where it was very hard to hire because how do you differentiate if everyone's like raising capital and everyone is trying to hire a lot of people? So it was very competitive, and and actually now it's better where you have a more stable environment where you can build a sustainable business. At the end of the day, any business you need to build on the long run and be sustainable and make a profit. So that's really great, and that's something we always have tried for. And honestly, it takes a bit the pressure off of just growing top line without looking at all the rest. So personally, I'm happy about it, and I think this macro environment is going to still last a while. That being said, I think the investment community has insane amount of cash still left, right? So there's definitely a lot of dry powder. I know larger investors, I'm not going to name names, that in last maybe 60 months didn't do any investments, and they're sitting on billions and billions of capital that's committed. So at a certain moment when the market return, I think you're going to see a big jump on these fundraisers, although at some more realistic valuations, but it's not gone, right? On our business, I think it's a quite interesting thing because before we started this, we never thought about only delivery. Although, for example, with what COVID happens, look, today in the UK, more than 40% of the people are ordering more than 3 times food delivery a week, right? So that's unimaginable before. So, the demand is there and still growing. But at Deliverect, we set out to help restaurants to go omni-channel. So really helping them to navigate the digitalization side and not only delivery, but also in store with a kiosk, with a QR code. So helping them to cover all aspects of digital ordering. And, whoever you are doing digital order, you still need us because someone needs to connect you with this restaurant and send the order to the kitchen. So that's what we do, and it's still an exciting time for us.
Yeah, that's what I think was, an interesting thing to then follow into when if we look at the pandemic as this massive adoption moment where pretty much every restaurant that wanted to stay open had to find a solution. Well, now we're on again, we're not on the end of that in terms of the pandemic necessarily, but we're definitely, I would expect that from a market penetration, most of the restaurants that were going to move to online ordering and delivery connection stuff have done that. So where does that leave a company like yours in terms of growth? And so you're saying that now it's about adding more functionality, more things than just the simple putting your menu online. So now it's maybe going a little deeper into your relationship with them technologically, or is that where you see your market development at now that we're kind of at this point where I can't imagine a restaurant today not already having this in place?
So two things. One, a lot of restaurant does not have this in place because the market is, there's 10 million restaurant that takes a lot of time to adopt these technology. I think, maybe 95% of the restaurant don't have this technology in place because it's a very still old world.
Really?
And
Okay.
the SMB.
I think I may be spoiled living in Paris. It feels like everything is already online.
Yeah, I think so. For SMB, yes, they are online, but they don't have the technology to connect with the point of sale. So because people, when they were in pandemic, they were just adopting these channels without being efficient, right? So what's these days, especially with inflation and labor cost shows, is like, hey, it's not enough to just sell online. I also need to be efficient. So I need to have tools that really allows you to manage it, decrease error rate, get the orders in, right? So we don't even just increase your sales volume by 20, 30%. We reduce all your error rate by 80%, right? One stat that you will not believe, but any delivery company has between a 5 to 8% error rate. So every 100 orders, there's 5 to 8 order refunded because was not delivered, wrong item, it's cold, and so on. So imagine the money that is wasted, right? So we reduce that. And then I think a second aspect is during the pandemic, because it was so urgent, restaurant big and small, and especially a lot of big, they adopted solutions that were just there. And they didn't think about, hey, does it really fit my strategy, my omni-channel? Is it future-proofing myself? And, especially I think we see a massive adoption in the last, 12 months of larger enterprise taking our software, even replacing sometimes what they have built themselves because they realize, hey, we rushed something through and now we're stuck, right? If you don't build something that is scalable, it's very hard to add it. It's like, technical debt when you made software. You can go quick, but then how do you make something solid for the future? So these two are really accelerating actually our business and not slowing down.
And so in that sense, it sounds like the big challenge is sort of both continuing to expand that functionality, but also new territories, deeper penetration into some of those markets. We were just chatting briefly offline as well. You're living in New York. So tell us a little bit how that fit in, how long you've been there and why you moved over there in terms of both the personal and the strategic value of relocating from Belgium to New York.
So first of all, I think we are very global, right? We serve restaurants in 40 markets, so on all continents. But one of the funny things is, US is one of our biggest markets. And I think, if you asked most customers in 2021 or even 2022, they would say, hey, yeah, this company is not per se in the US, although we had all these customers. And I think, a lesson learned, especially for European founders, is you want to make it in the US, you as a CEO or at least one of the co-founders need to move. It's not nice to have, you need to move. Because once the C-level is in the US, you guys are American as well, people tend to, because everyone's immigrants anyways, tend to, believe that you're a US company. And that makes a big difference in credibility and just getting the deal done. Because why would someone buy, important software that's processed, big chunk of your revenue from a different continent, right? And the anecdote there is, I'm not going to tell the name, but one of our very large customer we signed, very big enterprise, literally one of the C-level told me, you guys have the best product, best quality, best price. But if you were not living in New York, we would never have bought you guys. As you know, we are authentic US brand. There's no way we can just buy from a European company. So, so that alone was made the move worth it. So, and that's why we did it. But for the rest, I mean, we're really that international player, helping, you know, especially these chains around the world to scale in, you know, online.
So if we look at the trends over the past couple of years, obviously then there's this idea of restaurants that have been connecting so that they can take orders online, and then as you mentioned, now it's about having them become more efficient and more functionality, but also just really improving that whole process. Well, there's the other big theme that we've seen in the past couple of years has been the dark kitchen idea, where companies have, you know, now we're not talking about existing restaurants that are choosing to be delivery focused or at least add that into the mix, but actually restaurants being born to only be about delivery. So you are also a co-founder of dark kitchen startup Casper. If you just want to, you know, it's kind of a last thing to round up this topic. How's Casper? What's going on there? And how do you really balance, you know, that's two big things to be working on. Same theme, but, you know, very big businesses.
I think that was that started as it happens with me as you know a side gig, and then you know we tend to make these side gigs big if it works. So you know when I was doing Deliverect, I had obviously a lot of friends in the restaurant industry, and one of them had a PE group, and he said, "Hey, how about you know put your money where your mouth is, and let's start a kitchen." You know, we started one kitchen, you know, put 12 brand in there, and being very successful. And then from one led to the other, because it was also, you know, 2019. So just you know, couple months before the pandemic. So when it hit, we're like, okay, we need to scale this. So you know, as a side gig, we also raised their you know 5 million euros, and today we have 12 kitchens in 3 countries, right? So everywhere in Belgium, in big cities, in Netherlands, and now we opened our first kitchen in Lille and soon also in Paris. So to help you know that side of it. And you know, for me, it's a very big synergy. I don't run it. You know, we have a CEO. I'm more an investor and owner there. It's a very different dynamic. I need to be hands off, not typical for me. But what really works is, you know, it allows us to really utilize the technology we're building in Deliverect in the actual case at volume. And that's why I think we're at Deliverect very successful in the dark kitchen virtual brand. Pretty much everyone that is in this space is using us because it is tough, right? It's not, you know, get rich quick scheme, because running a kitchen is very operational, a very low margin. You have food costs, you need to make sure your staffing is right. So having that is important. And you need a volume, because just adding the kitchens is not that easy, right? You really need to add a lot of brand that allows you to have a high margin and a low touch, right? Because if you have a lot of brands, it means you need to teach your you know staff a lot of interaction points. And the secret sauce example for Casper is we actually have commissary kitchens that prepares a lot of these meals. And then so when it arrives in the local location, the staff there only need less than 8 interactions per dish to form a full meal, right? And that's the clue, because anything more than that, you can't scale, and then you're stuck as well. So there's a lot of lessons learned there, and you know there's cross synergies, and that works well.
Brilliant. Well, this has been a great conversation. Chris, I don't know if you had anything you wanted to say before we wrap up.
One last personal question, if you don't mind. You mentioned this earlier as well, but I know you moved to Belgium at a pretty young age from Shanghai, I believe.
Yeah.
You know, I came here from Silicon Valley, where you know, in the startup world, obviously, immigrants are sort of a core piece of the identity. Really, they power that ecosystem here. And Europe, that's and particularly where I am in France, it exists, but it's not at that same kind of level. And I'm just wondering, as an entrepreneur, obviously you more or less grew up in Belgium, but does that figure into your identity here as an entrepreneur? Does it affect your viewpoint or your ideas as an entrepreneur, or is that not really a factor at all in terms of how you've developed as a founder?
I think it's the world hemisphere. If you grow in, there's less that entrepreneurial side, so it's harder, right? But I had this, my parents were, very entrepreneurial, so I grew in that side. Um, Look, I really believe, especially in these age, you can build any great company anywhere, right? You do need to travel because you need to make these connections. Um, but you're not limited in a country. It's really your mindset, because at the end of the day, it's software. We're a digital age where we're calling each other, through Zoom, through whatever, around the world. And you have all these distribution channels, from the app store to online to whatever, that is global, and you have the access to this. And so I think it's sometimes we're finding excuse why they cannot do it. I really believe you can do it everywhere. That being said, I think at scale, especially if you want to raise capital, network is important. So it does help if you have that existing network, as it's not that easy to build credibility and raise a lot of capital if people don't trust you. So advice is, yeah, timing is important. You need to grind, but sometimes good things take a long time. We always tell people it's not a 4 years company. I've been doing this for 20 years. You want to do this, go back in time and start then. It's not just a quick thing you can do.
Well, tons of great insight in there for, I think, young founders and entrepreneurs to get into and to leverage and to think about. I appreciate so much all of that, and you taking the time to share with us this journey. Thanks, Zhong, for all of that. It's been a great conversation.
Thank you, Ethan. Thank you, Chris.
Thanks, Zhong.
Thank you as well to our audience, as always, and we will see you next time. Want more news and stories from across Europe's incredible innovation ecosystems and its entrepreneurs? Subscribe to Series.E on your preferred podcast platform and switch on notifications to be informed of new episodes as they are released. Don't forget to sign up for the newsletter on the website or Twitter to receive new articles, resources, podcasts, and videos direct to your inbox. You can connect with Chris and me on Twitter and LinkedIn. I am at Ethan Pierse, that's ETHANPIERSE, and Chris O'Brien is at OBRIEN. Let us know if there are guests that you would like to see on the interview podcast, as well as any stories that we should take a look at. As always, thank you for listening. We will see you next time.